Sometimes inspiration or awakening just happens. It's not very often that those random bolts of lightning happens. It usually comes from a major life shift, maybe a loss or a new love or a move. Like dieting, though, the changes that come on fast often are not the deepest or the most sustainable. More often than the sudden lightning bolt of insight, awakening is something that we have to prepare for, something that's hard-won. We probably know that the Buddha found enlightenment sitting under the Bodhi tree. Sitting under a tree waiting for enlightenment sounds really lovely, until we hear that he sat under that tree for 49 days. That's 7 weeks. Incidentally, it was a ficus tree. I know many of you have ficus trees in your own backyards. You might try, just remember it takes a while. Similarly, we hear in Jesus' story that right after he was baptized and God spoke to him for the first time, he went into the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights to figure this all out. Indigenous cultures around the world have an array of ways of preparing their minds and bodies for awakening or insight. There are sweat lodges and spirit walks. Those are some of the ones that we may have heard of. And I'm sure there are many other ways of preparing to receive insight. For a long time, in a tremendous variety of ways, people have prepared our hearts and minds for awakening. This journey, this effort isn't just for ancient holy seekers, though. It is for Unitarian Universalists, for you and for me today, maybe every day. The reading that we heard earlier from Emerson is strangely one of my favorite passages in our Unitarian canon. It's ironic, relying on a reading that is itself an invitation to move beyond the writings of old dead people to have a religion of our own today. But Emerson writes, "Why should we not also enjoy an original relation to the universe? Why should not we have a poetry and philosophy of insight and not of tradition? And a religion by revelation to us, not a history of theirs?" I think this is why many of our skeptics today push back against tradition. They rightfully ask, why are we leaning on all these outdated accounts of other people's experience of sources of truth? Why don't we rely on our own insights, our own reason, and our own encounter with the universe? And my answer is always yes. Sure, we draw from a treasure trove of tradition and accounts of wise, wonderful people. But our faith is focused less on what happened to those people and more on what happens to us here today, and how we open our hearts to pay attention to the beauty that surrounds us and the love that permeates each day. Today, I want to invite us to lean into the possibility of Unitarian Universalist awakenings. I'm not saying that all will be revealed. This is not an invitation to go from 0 to 10 overnight. This is an invitation to maybe go from a 3 to a 4, or a 4 to a 7. This is an invitation to lean in to this faith tradition and this particular community. As I tried to pinpoint a UU awakening this week, 2 things came to mind. The first one is more individualized. It's going to depend on your personal faith perspective. The first aspect of UU awakening I invite, I encourage, I request, let's see how demanding a UU minister can be. I implore you is to connect more deeply with your theological truth. If you love God, then as the Great Commandment invites, then love God with all your heart and all your soul and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. Dive in. And if you're a committed atheist, then reinvest in how absolutely fascinating this world is. Look at it deeply. Be willing to be amazed and to be humbled by what you find here. And wherever you land on the huge spectrum and diversity of beliefs between those, dive in. Or at least turn up the dial a couple of notches. I promise you will be happier for it. And I try not to make promises. The second type of awakening that I want to invite us to is the same for all of us. It's to lean into our 7 principles. And we have a lot of new folks around Tapestry these days, so let me briefly explain what this list of 7 principles that you see posted around, where it comes from. These principles were compiled by member congregations of our Unitarian Universalist Association. They're not dogma, but something that most of us agree with. It's a list that actually gets reviewed and rewritten from time to time. In fact, there's a lot of conversation underway about adding an 8th principle, and the whole list is coming up for a wholesale review pretty soon. Perhaps most important, what I want you to hear is that these ideas are aspirational. While in our best moments we believe these things to be true, every day is a struggle to live into these truths with our words and our actions. No one is perfect. But that doesn't absolve us from a responsibility or the opportunity to try to do a little better. When it comes to a UU awakening, it's tough to pinpoint a better focus than our 7 principles, particularly the 1st and the 7th. We honor and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person. And the 7th, we recognize the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. Numbers 2 through 6 are also really good. But I get a strong sense that if we get number 1 and number 7 right, the rest will fall into place. We honor and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person. And we respect an interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. Beyond our listing them as number 1 and number 7, these core teachings have been part of religious traditions around the world and throughout time. You can see them just about everywhere you look in different flavors and different languages. Now, it's not part of my tradition at all. I don't think I've even heard the whole song, but I'm often struck by the hymn lyric, "They will know we are Christians by our love, by our love." Some of you may have grown up singing that. I did not, but I think it's a striking sentiment. That's such a powerful idea to me. To some degree, people do know we are Unitarian Universalists by our action, by our action. In progressive activist circles, people know that UUs show up and speak out. Part of me hopes that we will be known as more than progressive loudmouths eventually. In addition, not replacing, but in addition to showing up at protests, I want them to know us because of showing up with curious minds and open hearts and listening ears and helping hands and heaping loads of compassion. Most of us are reluctant to tell people about our faith, but that doesn't mean that we should be shy about showing them our faith. And many of us do, all of us do, in ways big and small from day to day. This is just an invitation to lean into that part of your life a little bit more with intention. What if every morning we started our day with an intention to live into the reality of the inherent worth and dignity of every person and the interdependent web of all existence? And it doesn't need to be about being recognized. More important than they will know we are used by our whatever is that we will know we are Unitarian Universalists. We will know we're part of this community. We will know we are living our values as part of a tradition that is hundreds of years old. So as we begin a new congregational year together, a new school year for some of us, let us embrace the opportunity to awaken, to lean into our faith. Maybe you aren't poised for a wholesale personal transformation, but turn it up a little bit. You will be glad that you did. Amen.